Hello and welcome to another artist talk in the series of Deutsche Bank Collection Live, Meet the Artist. My name is Britta Färber. I'm the Chief Curator of the Deutsche Bank Art Program. And today it's my great honor to introduce you all to Kapwani Kiwanga. She will be with us in Zoom via audio today. Hi, Kapwani. How are you?
Hello, I'm well, thank you.
Okay. Great to have you. Before we start, I have to draw your attention to a few organizational points. During the conversation, please be so kind to mute yourself. You will have the opportunity to post questions afterwards through the chat function. The talk is also being streamed via Facebook and YouTube, where you can follow it now or watch it later. So I jump to my presentation now. Hang on. The four works, or the two works on the right, are by Kapwani Kiwanga and are currently being presented in the exhibition Ways of Seeing Abstraction, works from the Deutsche Bank collection in our Palais Populaire in Berlin. We acquired them and two more in 2020 and are truly proud to have these works in our collection. We will talk about these works later on in depth. I would like to introduce you now to Kapwani and give you a bit of background. There you can see her as well. Kapwani Kiwanga is a Franco-Canadian artist born in 1978 in Hamilton, Canada. She now lives and works in Paris, and where she is also today. She's well known for her incredible curiosity in connecting different disciplines, and her work often manifests as installations, sound, video, painting, and performance. Actually, the first time I saw her or I experienced her work was at a lecture performance in Frankfurt back in 2016, like in a situation more or less like you see it here. Her work reflects system of power and injustice, oppression and resistance of broader cultural narratives. Political histories and particularly Black histories are often the starting point. For this reason, research plays an important role in the development of her work. One reason might be, interestingly, Kapwani Kiwanga studied anthropology and comparative religion in Montreal and art at l'École des Beaux-Arts de Paris. She has had many important exhibitions internationally. In 2020 alone, she showed her work at Haus der Kunst in Munich, Centre d'Art Contemporain in Ivry-sur-Seine, sorry about my French, and Pascal Centre d'Art in Biel. And last but not least, at Paris Centre Pompidou, where she was awarded with a prestigious Prix Marcel Duchamp. Congratulations on this one. So let me again welcome Kapwani Kiwanga directly from Paris. Great, thank you that you could make it today.
Pleasure to be here.
Firstly, may I pose a question about your background? You studied anthropology and comparative religion, and so becoming an artist was not your original goal. As we know, you definitely are a part of the art world by now and are an artist, a very successful one. Could you tell us a bit how your career developed in this way? Did your unique background also inspire your commitment to research within your practice?
Well, thank you for those kind words. I think I came to art kind of slowly, meaning that, as you mentioned, I started studying anthropology, comparative religion, simply as an undergraduate. But I quickly found that I wasn't going to be able to do all I wanted to do in the academic world. And I thought I was going to become a filmmaker. So I started to do documentary filmmaking, particularly for television, because I found that was maybe the medium which was the most democratic of sorts, that was accessible to people who could read or not read, who came back from a hard day's work and didn't have maybe all of the time to open up a book, but could, in fact, watch television and learn things. So that was what I first thought I was going to do. But eventually, that too felt like it was a bit too not layered enough, the narratives that I could build. And so for that reason, I started to think about making art. And I'd say that it took a long time to come to it, I mean, a few years of muddling around and trying things out. And it's only when I really went back to my real passion for research and brought that into the art practice that it really started to make sense. So I'd say it's when I was able to kind of reconcile looking for new forms and the base of going into archive or just reading from different disciplines and that kind of research side, that making art made sense. It had to really have that pillar for me, or else it's a bit more complicated for me to really grab a hold and find my own center if I'm not have research somehow in the process.
Okay, great. I think you mentioned already an important keyword, and we will come to this in a minute. You talked about layers, right? I would like to start with these works, the counter illuminations, which we have in our collection. And this is also, first of all, I would like to know, or maybe you could explain a bit more about the construction of these artworks. They look like paintings in a way, and we can see that you use different materials to create layers. And can you tell us how you construct an image like this, and how important is this kind of layering in your work?
So these works were made in my studio in Paris with some materials I had hanging around in the studio from past video shoots or different materials that were here, and some things I kind of borrowed or came about because I was really interested in this question of visibility and how layering, as you spoke about, can obscure but also allow for visibility. And at that point in time, I was really interested in this question of cloaking or obscuring in ways of, I guess, actions of trying to have spaces that are not under surveillance, spaces that can be more free. And so just working with these materials that were quite simple. One sees that, we have glass, we have also kind of a reflective mirror that reflects back, and in the reflection back at the viewer, it obscures what's, of course, is behind it. So this kind of back and forth between seeing and being obscured was quite important in this layering, which really was a kind of a sculptural kind of installation in the studio. But when it's transferred onto this format, does become again a two-dimensional kind of a flat surface that again also flattens and kind of obscures the complexity of the work, but does point towards this question of layering that you did mention.
So you really built this in your studio, and then you photograph it, and you use all the different materials. So that it's not digitally kind of also
no.
in. Okay.
No, there's a bit of cleaning up in the end, of course, of balancing colors and things like that. But it's all it's all real objects that were photographed.
Great, thank you. And also, you were also touching some of the points about layering, because there are different layers of meaning, starting with this term of counter illumination, which is a method of active camouflage. And you were touching this obscuring already. And this counter illumination, as I understood, is something which is used, a camouflage used in the military context, that light is produced that matches the background, so creating a specific camouflage. And what is your interest in this idea? Also, the concept of surveillance is prominent. The Venetian blinds, the mirrors show it clearly. Could you expand a bit on what these themes mean to you?
Yeah, I think that these works kind of pulled together, I would say, a few years of interest around architecture and surveillance. So there's kind of a couple of things I think we could probably pull out from these particular works that could speak about other works too. So the kind of the use of light, for example, like we see it in this image, is something that I was thinking about in the past, and I continue to think about, is how light has been used for questions of surveillance, but particularly in the case of racialized bodies. So past laws which were existed in the United States, but elsewhere as well, which laws which stated that people who were in the condition of slavery, who moved around at nighttime, would need to have a lit candle or something to allow them to be identified if they were not accompanied by somebody who would be quote unquote called white.
We can jump. Maybe we can quickly jump to this work, because
yeah,
this is this work Glow, isn't it?
Exactly.
Sorry.
And And that's exactly it. So this kind of interest in the light and the kind of the historic anecdote I was speaking about before inspired these particular series of sculptures called Glow. And so that kind of the light, which one finds in counter illumination, comes from that first interest in how something as simple and quote unquote natural as light is harnessed in ways to kind of to control, to underlie and support power. And at the same time, there's another bit of vocabulary, I think, that I was working with previously in these kind of Venetian blinds, or what took place in a sculpture that I'd done a few years before called jalousie. So it's a similar idea of these kind of slatted, these slats which allow at once to obscure what's behind it, but also to allow the person on the other side to see out. So it's this kind of this disequilibrium, or this imbalance again in seeing and the gaze and the power that is associated with that. But in that particular work, jalousie, one has another kind of, I guess, element that complexifies it again, is that the blinds, or these kind of these slates themselves, are made of two-way mirrors. So it reflects the light back, and it also allows there to be this transparency. So there's this very much structural double play of the Venetian blinds, or of the jalousie, these slats, allowing light in and out, but also the material itself of this two-way mirror, which is also present in this particular image, which is the mirror that one sees on the horizontal plane. So kind of on this image would be kind of like the flat surface is also this two-way mirror. In that particular material, the two-way mirror, when you're on one side, it reflects back the light, and on the other side allows the other person to see through and not to be seen. So for me, combining those two very simple things, technologies, one more modern or contemporary, this two-way mirror or one-way mirror, and one a bit more older, this kind of idea of Venetian blinds or slated windows, was a way to also speak about how our technologies evolve, but our strategies, I guess, don't change so much. This idea of being able to observe another one, to be able to control them. So this vocabulary of these little kind of, I guess these little phrases were kind of combined from past works and past research and thinking around questions of surveillance and sight, and linking those to, of course, historic backgrounds. But they all kind of culminated in this more abstract composition in these two pieces of counter illumination. But what's important or interesting, I think, to say too, is that, of course, counter illumination is used in military settings, but it's also found in the natural environment as simply a way of protection and camouflaging, so that especially in the sea or in the ocean. So it's something that nature itself has put in place to allow for different beings to protect themselves from quote unquote predators.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting that you find these mechanisms, as you were saying, in different times with different techniques, but the strategy behind is always the same, right? The kind of it's about power and the power of the gaze in a way. I would like to show also this one where we can see it, this work, the counter illumination, which was created for the 2020 Capture Photography Festival in Vancouver. And here you, and it was really a site-specific commission. So you put it on this, it is partially masking this facade of a modernist building. And again, is it again? You continue from my last from the question about camouflage and surveillance. Are you maybe also interested in ways individuals and groups can stand up against forced visibility and surveillance in the contemporary world? Do you think it is really possible to counter this surveillance, or can we only open up dialogues about it? I know it's a very big question, but still, I didn't want to leave it out.
Yeah, I don't know if I have such a kind of a conclusive response to that, but I think in any case, some people try, and I think that gesture of trying to decide for oneself, and if one chooses not to follow certain structures that might be put in place to surveil, to collect data, then that's showing people's free will to be able to control their own movements and their own identities, whether that be virtual or physical. And I think what was interesting with this particular work, on this scale and putting this on this building, that it also goes back to that idea of confronting different moments or different historic moments of I guess concept as well, because this is our modern moment when the questions of surveillance and visibility are a bit different than when this modernist building was made. If I'm not mistaken, it's the 50s, but I could be wrong. So please don't take that as fact. And at that moment, this kind of very modern, it's a power generating plant, which in the middle of Vancouver, so the downtown, and it had these transparent facade to allow for, of course, to see the mechanisms of how energy was generated, but also to be this kind of transparent and accessible democratic space. So thinking that being able to see is one way of being transparent, of being fair, being allowing for dialogue.
Open.
And we see that as time goes through, and it depends on how one positions themselves also within society and what their agency might be, or their power in particular structures, that the question of visibility is not always one that wants to be welcomed. And so this particular choice to kind of respond to the building was also to ask the question, is transparency what we always want? And whose transparency? And etc. So it was important for me to kind of to also think about this evolution, as we say that sometimes strategies of seeing or of controlling might say somewhat the same, but the technologies change over time. At the same time, concepts and philosophies and ideas that one might hold up as valuable can also shift as our times do. And I think that continual flux and fluidity of thought and continually critiquing in a positive and constructive way is something that I try to insert in all of my works. That there's this kind of pointing to or opening up towards fluidity and flux. So that's something that I try to propose.
Yeah, interesting. So when I hear you talking now, it's always about ambiguity. That's what you mean, right? That you could see it from this and from this side, like you look through the Venetian blinds in a way, or like you look through the mirror, which is reflecting, but at the same time it could be a mirror you look through. And so it's this what you call flux, I guess. Great. Thank you. I had to repeat it for myself. Sorry. We can come to another group of works. These two works are also. This is again an installation shot from the Palais Populaire. These are linear paintings from 2018. And I will go on to show a bigger group of them from another installation. I don't know where this exhibition was. Sorry, Kapwani.
It's at the Esker Foundation, which is in Canada, in Calgary.
Okay. So you see a bigger group of these works, and what we can see here is that you very clearly utilize the formal language of minimalism. And at the same time, again, you are interested in how architecture affects our behavior and feelings. In this series, you refer to the Alberta Hospital, and correct me if I say something wrong now, but this is what I read, that this hospital was built in 1911, and it was not only the first psychiatric institution in the Canadian province of Alberta, but also notorious as a place using eugenics, where individuals identified as so-called defective, terribly, were subjected to forced sterilization to kill their bloodlines. Could you tell us a bit more about the background of these works?
So with the kind of the larger grouping that one sees here, and it's a project that's continuing little by little. I'm really interested in looking at different institutions, very varied. So they can be prisons, they can be, as you mentioned, hospitals or psychiatric hospitals, they can be schools, sometimes they're factories. But what's important for me is to look at those spaces that have two-toned wall colorings. So this idea of having a color of the wall on the inferior part, which is one color, and the superior another. And basically, it's going through different archive and finding the color schemes that were used in these different institutions, and then simply extracting those colors, reproducing them on drywall, and hanging them as though they were paintings. And as you see, they're kind of hung in a way in this particular grouping, so that an invisible line, which is more or less at 100, here it's not an invisible but a visible line, but in other cases the line is not painted on the wall, but the hanging, the kind of the horizontal horizon line, one could say, is at 160 centimeters from the ground, and that's not a kind of a luck kind of question height. It was one that was chosen because when I was doing some research around tuberculosis and kind of the hygienic movement, and particularly when we had this influx of people within Europe going into cities and this rise of tuberculosis, a lot of discussion and writing being done around how to deal with tuberculosis in terms of urban planning, but also how to deal with interiors. And some German architects actually suggested at a conference, tuberculosis, I believe in 1905 in Paris. I could be wrong on that too. My dates are sometimes slip, but in any ways, in Paris in 1919s, there was a suggestion that there should be a particular kind of paint that is washable definitely in hospitals, but in other spaces as well, that raises up to 160 centimeters from the ground to allow for the treatment of getting rid of bacteria, getting rid of any viruses that could propagate tuberculosis. So that's why I chosen that particular height and thought about that as maybe the dividing line. And it happens to be one of the spaces, it's not always 160 in different institutions, but I was finding, looking at historic spaces and myself remembering visiting different institutions as a younger person, this kind of two-tone applying to walls and wondering where that had come from, and simply asking a question that kind of circled back and found an answer. Maybe it's not the only answer. I mean, there's probably other answers which are practical ones, but this particular one around social hygiene and also the question of controlling tuberculosis was a starting point of thinking about these two-tone wall colorings. And then the particular colors used have different kind of, I guess, theories. One is this American color theorist called Faber-Baron, who was quite in demand, I would say, and was recruited by different institutions, be it the US Coast Guard or different corporations, to think about color schemes that would influence the behavior of either, it's people that are using the facilities or workers, etc., to create different atmospheres and moods. And so he created his own theories around which colors and color combinations would have certain effects and desired effects for those that would be occupying those spaces. So what one sees, in this larger grouping of images, of paintings, ranges, across time and also across geographic areas. One has a French Pinot colony in Guyana. There are, some different institutions, be that a school in Alberta, as well as the mental hospital that you spoke about. There's a factory from Chicago, and it continues. It goes on and on with different references.
Okay, so if we see this group of works, they are referring to different institutions.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay.
And so maybe the prior one would have.
These were, I understood that these were referring to the Alberta Hospital.
Yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And in what case that you really, what is the specific reference then? Actually the colors used, or is it more a looser reference? But actually the colors.
The colors, yes, as close as we could approximate based on either photos, and sometimes you have paint chips, sometimes you just have we're lucky enough to have a reference to a particular RBG code or something. It really depends on the archive itself, but it's really trying to approximate as best as we can with the colors that are available, the colors that were used at that time.
And in these specific cases, did you also find out in the documents why which color was used, or is it a more general kind of?
No, it was more general. But what is
Mhm.
interesting in this particular case with the greens is that this is something that one finds a kind of a pattern or a trend, that green started to be used in hospitals quite a bit. And I think the first time that I came across it being kind of written about came from a surgeon who was working in St. Luke's Hospital in San Francisco, I believe. And he was using in operating rooms, and he first started to put green in the operating rooms because it was a contrast to red. And it was a way for him to kind of to how would I say that, to rest his eyes when he was looking up from the insides of a body which he was doing surgery. So, and not to have that glaring white which was before the colors used in operating rooms. And from there, there has been some kind of historic kind of studies around the use of green in different hospital settings that continued on. And it kind of shifted somewhat, and it was then seen also as a kind of a reference almost to nature, and kind of thinking about nature's healing aspects in hospitals, to kind of to bring in nature to calm, and also to to heal the patients who are recovering. So this it's interesting how that it became just kind of quote unquote institutionalized as a color in different shades of green in hospitals at a certain time, kind of from that first very practical use, but then it became also theorized in some way to really think about these greens almost being alluding to pastoral fields that would heal and make a peaceful setting for those who were recovering in hospital.
Interesting. Yeah, and it's up to today. It's used. Wow, interesting. Good, thank you. Yeah, this is. I think I can skip this one, but it was also about. I mean, what is interesting about it, that it is really an immersive installation, and you kind of experiment with these two colors, and the pink blue. The pink, I understood, also refers to a special color called Baker Miller pink, which should reduce hostile, violent, or aggressive behavior, whereas the blue is kind of calming down, or is also used to prevent drug abuse in public bathrooms. How do you see and how do you see the viewer in this context? Do you really want to experience him or her this kind of color, the kind of sorry, my English, the effect of the colors, or what is your idea behind it?
That's exactly it. There's this desire for the body to experience these colors, and this supposed calming pink is not so calming if you've stayed in this space for too long, and this blue is actually quite disorienting in some ways. So creating spaces in which something so as innocuous as color, meant to be, can have such a physical effect is a way to I guess to really allow the viewer to not just view, but to experience and have a phenomenological encounter with the work. So it's not just theory, it's also relying on the intelligence of the body to be able to understand a concept and to understand how color can be used in such ways that can, affect you in quite a strong way. Of course, I create a space that's particularly tailored in some way, and it's kind of long corridors, so it creates a very specific experience of these colors. But one is quote unquote obliged to navigate through those different moods or those different experiences of those two colors. But altogether, it creates an experience which is quite. Yeah, it is a physical experience. It's not just one which one thinks about and reads text about how this color was used. It's really experienced through the body.
Okay. I think we can skip this one. We talked about it a bit before, right? And I would love to come to this one, to the Potomiton. It's a very new work of yours. I saw it in original like 2 weeks ago in Basel in a wonderful booth. And it's the photos can't show it really. It's very beautiful and made from sterling silver, like chains, necklaces, delicate necklaces coming down from the ceiling, and with these floral charms. The title Potomiton is referring to an essential structural element from the voodoo kind of Haitian voodoo temples. It's the center pole central pole in the temple. But I also learned that there is a different story behind it, which again touches Black history. Would you mind expanding on this a bit? And also, I have the impression you are kind of enticing your audience and attract the attention to this beauty, and then you kind of shows something very different, or tells something very different, which is not beautiful at all in a way. And yeah, it's could you expand on the story behind as well as your specific approach, please?
Sure. So this work, Potomiton, as you said, is a quite recent work, and I guess that formally it refers to two things. There's the Potomiton that is part of the peristyle, or the gathering place in Haitian voodoo, but it also is kind of alluding to the witch's ladder, which was found, and there's a lot of debate around if this was the actual use of the object or not, but was found in England. Was said to be a device, which is basically a cord with different knots with different sticks and feathers and different plant bases that are linked into that were meant to be used by witches, quote unquote, to access a spiritual realm or the other realm. So thinking about these kind of vertical kind of links between a spiritual world or another world and the territory, the kind of terrestrial one, was why I chose to work with this verticality. And then these silver sculptures that kind of adorn the different chains are replicas of two different plants. So the first is pokeweed, and the second is Mimosa pudica. So they're two different plants that come from, they're found a bit all over the world, but pokeweed is very much found in the Americas, and Mimosa pudica is also, but I first came across its reference in notes taken by a botanist who had traveled to Suriname and was doing some research on how people who were in the condition of slavery used plants for healing, but also for as poison. And he was particularly interested in the quest how poison was used. And pudica, Mimosa pudica was meant to be one of these plants that was used to poison. Another kind of archive or starting point for this particular project is the pokeweed, and this is kind of the first, I guess, which is in the foreground of the image, is a leaf of pokeweed. And pokeweed was mentioned in the trial of a woman whose name is Delphi in Virginia, in the United States of America, who was also in the condition of slavery and who was accused of trying to poison her owner, and was put on trial. And so these two these replicas of the leaves and the flowers of these two plants kind of oscillate in different points of this kind of loose grid of vertical chains. And so I guess you're right in terms of creating a space which I hope is enticing to allow people to spend time and to kind of look and to think and reflect on sometimes violent, or often violent and difficult subject matter, because my interest is often around the case of power imbalance, and that's not often a joyful space, but it's a really important one, and it's one that I think we need to spend a bit more time with. And it's not always easy to spend time with such things, but I think if we're able to add that reality, which is always around us, and not push it away, but to kind of embrace it with everything else, we're able to maybe to lighten it a bit more and give it less of its power, to allow it to dissipate, and to welcome it in and say, maybe we don't need to have this around us some more. But if we don't acknowledge it, then I think it contains a space which is not so productive.
Wow, thank you. Good. I would jump to another group of works now. This is your series of works, Flowers for Africa. And this is where you received for this group of work, you received the Prix Marcel Duchamp in 2020. And this project is a journey into the collective memories and archives reflecting on colonialism in Africa. For each exhibition, you recreated a floral arrangement depicted in archival images of celebrations of independence. These flowers, they invite us to think about time and history, but also about the tradition of vanitas. And please, can you tell us more about these fantastic pieces?
Sure. So Flowers for Africa is an ongoing project, and it's a project I'm quite happy that I think will follow me for a few years to come, partly because it's not always easy to find images that I'm looking for, and I'm very specific what kind of images I'm looking for. And the images need to be ones which are part of the public domain, so not part of a private collection. They're images that must coincide with a particular date or an event that is really key in marking African independence of a particular country. That can be a negotiation between two different parties. It could be the signing of an accord or an agreement. It could be a celebration on the first day of independence or the declaration. Or it could be the visit of a particular dignitary that leads to independence. And so finding images that are, that coincide with those dates, but also that have floral arrangements of cut flowers. We're not talking about plants that are potted, but cut flowers is not always so easy. And so to date, I think I've done around 16. There are 54 African countries to date. So I have some work to do still. But the idea behind this work is that I take this archival image, it's shown to a florist, a local florist, and he, she, or they will reproduce the floral arrangement to the best of their ability with the available flowers. And those are then placed in the exhibition space and left as they are for the duration of the exhibition. So they'll fade away, they will change, and that idea of flux, and not trying to hold on to or create a monument, but rather a space to resuscitate or to revive or to rethink a past moment, but to let it slip away. What is quite important about this work too is it's very much based on interpretation. So each floral arrangement is different than the one that came before. The florist will create a floral arrangement based on their own taste, but also on their own ideas and information that they have got from me, but also just their life experience. And they'll create they'll all receive the same image, but they'll interpret it in a different way. And it's also speaking about the power of history and its interpretation, and also the multiple perspectives and subjectivities that history is. I mean, it's very hard to talk about a history as though it's a concise and a narrative that is written in one voice. So that's quite important in this project as well as the fact that the original archival image is never shown. The floral arrangements themselves are the documents. They are there, they're placed, and they're left to slip away, to change, and to continually ask us about, of course, a moment has passed and we can rejuvenate it in our mind, but it will change, it will mutate, and we need to be flexible, I think, and nimble in our way of assessing past. But also, I think it speaks to the fragility of these moments, all political moments and all political projects that necessitate care and necessitate active engagement, not a simple symbolic gesture. So in that case, this is, I guess, the main aspects of the project. And and what I do like about this project too is that it shows, the variety and the diversity of these moments and the histories of the African countries. We go from the very architectural, which was the first image you showed, to the very, very small, intimate, which could be, a little almost like a corsage or boutonniere, so that serves about the human scale. And it speaks also to the fact that, some transitions into independence were bloody and they were civil wars, and those are very kind of slight and floral arrangements that might, grace a negotiation table, and others are more planned and have been diplomatically negotiated out, and they're more pomp, and there's more, I guess, ceremony around that, and that will reflect in the compositions as well. So there's something, I think, really that is maybe another access again into thinking about history through the floral, and thinking about these particular floral arrangements as witnesses of the acts of these coming into or birthing of these new states, just as I think those floral images speak to also the citizen who's not present in the image, but it might be on the onlookers, or might be on, lining the streets as a parade happens. So it's very much the archival image itself pushes out beyond the archival image, and I think that's when the floral arrangements themselves kind of hold a space to think beyond just the official shaking of hands of political figures.
Yeah, I mean, it's of course you start immediately thinking, and if you see this Flowers for Africa, Rwanda, which is this huge portal in a way, then related to Rwanda, you think about all this terrible uprisings and murderings which happened then, and you see this triumph arc in a way, and in a way it's also a bit, how to say, I mean, dystopic is too strong, but it's it's really sad as well, to put it as easy. If I see something like this, and then think of Rwanda, what happened over there, and so many things can start from this. This is what I want to say. Good. But then the beauty again, it's incredible to see it. I think we skipped this one. We saw you before, and I just no, not yet. I stay here, but I would like to ask you one last question, because I'm really curious. What are your future plans? What projects have you got coming up in the next few months? And a huge question: what are your hopes and dreams? What is it you are thinking about right now?
I'm very lucky that I have a busy schedule coming up, thinking about, group exhibitions and solo ones in different parts of the world. Things are keeping me busy. I'm kind of continuing that thought around poison and its use in liberation. Thinking again about, botany and all of those kind of things that seem to kind of run through my work, but also, thinking more, I think, in a very, I guess, aesthetic way about space and how to sculpt spaces and installations. So I have a lot of different things in different forms and different scale of work coming up in the next 6 months or so. And I guess my hopes and dreams, I don't know, I guess it's to be able to continue to, personally anyways, to continue to do the work that I'm doing. So it's such a privilege to be able to find a way to do the research and to, I guess, share it with other people through the medium of art. And I guess what another of my hopes, a bigger hope is that what we've passed through globally in the past time, that we've all lived very different experiences of that we somehow can think about these questions of asymmetries of power, these questions of imbalances. And this is a moment that we can think again. I think we always have moments to think about how to kind of level the field a bit more, to make life a bit more joyful for everyone, and let alone bearable. And so I think my hope is that, we all have lived through different variations of uncomfort, I guess, in these past months, that we can continue to think about that and think about the other, or our neighbors close or far away in that kind of reflection. I guess that's my hope.
Thank you. Thank you. Very nice.
Thank you.
Just one last word for our viewers. There is a work on view right now in the public space. I don't have an image of it right now in Hamburg. Kapwani, you made a work for the public space, which will be on view until the end of October. Where exactly is it placed in Hamburg, Kapwani?
So it's part of Imagine the Cities project, which is based in Hafen City. So it's part of a larger group exhibition called The Gate. And my particular work called Bedform, which is a large sculpture which is made out of copper, can be found on Dar Salamplatz. So it's, I couldn't tell you exactly.
Hafen City, in the
Hafen
City.
In Hafen City. And so there you go. You can see it until the end of October. Yeah. And as we said, it changes.
Comes to Hamburg. Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
Whoever is in Hamburg or gets to Hamburg, don't miss Kapwani's sculpture. And as you said, it changed the with the light, right?
Mm-hmm. That's very much. One cannot, I guess, make abstraction of the environment, the weather. I think in any place, but in Hamburg particularly. And so the light will kind of affect how the sculpture is appreciated. But that was the kind of main thought when I was making the work. Anyways, was thinking about the changing light and clouds and etc. that are part of the environment of Hamburg.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Are there any questions? Maybe I have to stop the presentation then. There is a question I can see. It's Saul Jett. Hi, I would like to know about your film work future plans. Thanks for the question, Saul. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a nice question. I don't really have any films per se that are planned. And to be honest, I don't always know the form that my research is going to take or how it's going to consolidate. So I'll start researching, and then at one point I'll say, I think this has to be a film, or this has to be a sculpture or an installation. And that depends once on the invitation that I have. So for example, if I'm invited to a specific space, I will sometimes make an installation. And sometimes video will find its way within a larger project, but I don't have anything coming up right now in terms of film, but it may pop up. I mean, as I said, I'm working on some new projects, and at the moment I don't see any film coming up, but it could be that I start doing some research around something and I realize that the way to express it might be film. So as of today, there's no film that's coming up, but it could be in a couple months' time that I start working on something. So I really do allow the research to guide me.
Okay, thank you. Did this answer your question, Saul? He can't talk, so I can't. I guess so.
Let's hope so.
Okay. Yes, let's hope so. Okay, so any further questions? No, I can open up again. It's the same question, no? Good. Yes. So thank you very much, Kapwani. This was very interesting.
Well, thank you for the questions, and yeah, thank you for allowing me to share a little bit.
Great. Okay, so bye-bye and thanks a lot.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.